Hello and welcome to the Law of Relevancy podcast. We guarantee that you will learn at least one thing through today's discussion. We bring you marketing industry experts to talk about things that will enhance your careers and your lives, thus helping you to stay more relevant. I'm Owen. I'm the president of Bake More Pies, a full-service digital marketing advertising agency based here in Tampa, Florida. Today we're bringing you Leigh George. She is the founder and CEO of Freedom. Freedom is a strategic branding and marketing agency. Actually, it's an agency wholly devoted to innovation and based in DC. Hi, Leigh. How are you?
Hey, great to be here.
Yeah, thanks for joining us. Real excited about our discussion today. We're going to be talking about content marketing and how to remain relevant with consumers through the content that the brands are creating these days.
Great.
That's great. Anyhow, before we get started, Leigh, I'd like our audience to know a little bit about you. You've got quite an intriguing background. You actually have a PhD in marketing. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
That's right. Yeah. So PhD in branding. So it's I went to a very sort of unusual graduate program. It's at Binghamton University, and it's called the History and Theory of Visual Culture. So it's not just fine art; it's any sort of visual cultural production. So it could be tattoos, it could be graffiti. I wanted to study design, graphic design, corporate identity, and branding because I felt that it had more impact on our daily lives than any other sort of visual cultural production. So that's when, in sort of studying the history of branding and corporate identity, I learned that I really wanted to be doing the very things that I was studying. So I left academia, made the switch to agency life. In DC, worked at very small niche boutique agencies, all the way up to Ogilvy. So I have a kind of range of experiences at different kinds of companies.
Yeah, and so you've created something that you're calling the Unagency. Can you tell us a little bit about what that is, and was there a moment in your career with the large agencies, or a moment where you just said, "Hey, this has to be done a better way"?
I think rather than a moment, it was more like a drip, 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 right? That you finally can't take anymore. And some of the drips were like the billable hour, which, for people in agencies, it annoys us to have to keep track of that stuff. But who it really annoyed were clients. It really just kind of jeopardized a relationship before you even got going, because you were constantly saying to them, "Oh, I'm sorry, that's going to be extra. I'm sorry, that's going to be extra." And it really gets in the way of building a relationship. And then just the lack of collaboration. I found agencies, there are a lot of egos, and they like to come in the room and kind of tell clients the solution and suggest that they are only capable of coming up with the solution. And I had always felt that clients had a wealth of institutional knowledge. They knew their business inside and out. They were passionate about it better than I did. And so it was really important to involve them in the process. And I think too, the lack of flexibility oftentimes that you see with agencies, that they kind of come to clients with a menu and say, "Okay, here's what we do. This is how much it's going to cost. What do you have?" And there was no consideration for kind of the unique circumstances that different clients have. And then finally, really kind of realizing that especially in-house marketers, what they really lack is time for strategy, that they are so bogged down in meetings. It's not really the execution they need help with, it's the ideas. And so it was all this sort of accumulation of thinking about these kind of drip, drip, drips until finally I said, why don't we turn all this on its head? Don't have a billable hour, have, value-based pricing or project-based pricing, involve the clients in the process, create custom approaches, and really focus on strategy. So what I ended up doing was I called some former clients of mine, and I said, "I have this idea, want to run it by you," and they were all absolutely enthusiastic about it. So that's sort of what gave me the courage to launch my own company.
Yeah, I totally feel you on that one. A few years ago, I started Bake More Pies, and a lot of it had to do with the billable hour. I came from an agency where every single thing was time and materials, and it was grueling to have to keep up with it, as well as, and because honestly, deep down, you want to help your clients, right? Well, the whole incentive
Exactly.
system around
Exactly.
a billable hour,
Right.
it challenges that entire system. You're discouraging your clients from talking to you because now all of a sudden they blow their budgets, right? And
Right. Right. Right.
so and I've even heard you say, I mean, how many projects go perfectly, right?
Yes, exactly. So I've never had a project go exactly according to the timeline that I set up, and so I think too, it's about flexibility, but it's also about empathy, right? Your clients these organizations have reached out to you because they need help. The last thing they need
Right.
for someone to do is like, sorry, if I'm going to help you, you need to pay me even more. So just trying to be empathetic to their situation and flexible. And I think I've never had, knock on wood, a client take advantage of that. I think they really respect the value that I add and understand if they're going to introduce a project that's completely different from what we're working on, then that would need to be scoped separately. But, adjustments and course corrections, I'm happy to accommodate.
Sure, and I imagine that if you're going to have that model, you've got to be pretty keen on how to keep track of scope changes and understanding when like a client may be, maybe stepping outside of the scope, right?
Right. And what I found is that clients know when they are. When you've set up a good relationship, they know if they come to you and ask for something completely different from what you're already working on. And so typically when that happens, they'll come to me and say, this is a new project. They won't say, hey, can I shoehorn this in? Because again, you've built a relationship. It's not just this transactional relationship. It's a true it's a relationship of mutual respect. And so I empathize with them, respect their situation, and they respect me as well. So I feel like it just builds much more valuable relationships when you work together that way.
Absolutely. I even feel that some of my best friends are my clients, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. So let's get into the little bit of the meat of discussion today. So I know you are, an amazing expert when it comes to positioning, to messaging. When you work with a brand, how do you help them really get to the meat of like how to be more authentic with their client base, or how do you help craft that?
Well, I think what I talk about to all my clients is that really, if you don't have if you don't have a brand that provides a solid foundation, then you're going to have a really hard time connecting with your customers, because your brand is really at its essence what you stand for, the reason you exist. And it's more than just to make money, right? There has to be some purpose driving you. And so if you don't know what that is, you're going to really struggle. But to really have the brand be successful, you need to understand not only what you stand for, what your purpose is, but how that connects with what your customers care about. So it's two parts. So for example, I'm working with a client now to really help them articulate what their purpose is, and then what are the sort of supporting things, the pillars that support that and allow them to deliver on that purpose. And then we're moving on to really understand, well, how does that connect with what your audience cares about?
Could you give us an example of what that would look like? Like what kind of things could they do to help prove, that they do actually believe in their purpose?
Well, I mean, they first have to define it. So it's
Enter
that can be
yeah.
really, really hard, because what they want to do is talk about their products, services, features, and benefits. Right. So I'm sure a lot of you have heard of Simon Sinek, find your why, right? You're not selling what you do or how you do it, because there are others that sell the exact same thing. What people really buy is your why. And it's really hard. I mean, I've seen this in workshops I've done, as well as with clients I'm working, for them to get beyond what they do or even how they do it. And that in a way, it's like a corporate therapy session, right? You have to really dig deep in, kind of look at the history of the company, the history of the brand, the founder's story. Why did the company even start to begin with?
Sure.
And really kind of help them think about, at a higher level, what is it that they stand for and how is that different from other organizations? So it takes, and again, it's not something I don't go away and make it up and come back to them with it. It has to be something that they generate themselves, because they have to own it.
Sure.
After the project's gone and I'm out of there, they're the ones that have to live and breathe this brand. So it's a lot of soul searching to kind of figure out what that is.
How do you help a brand? So obviously, I 100% agree with you in terms of they have to own their brand and who they are and all of those things. And it sounds like you have a very disciplined approach for how you lead them through those discussions. How do you help a company who maybe you feel like could be on a better path? Like, how do you help them, like when they're being who they are, they need to like change or evolve. How do you help still incorporate them into the process, but also have them evolve?
Well, I think typically when you're looking at like a rebrand, right, where something's happened and they're just not getting the response they used to, the brand's not resonating, sales are declining, whatever it might be. In those cases, it's because they're not connecting to what customers care about, right? Because you brand and the world goes on. Things change, behaviors change, priorities change, challenges change for your audience. And so it's not enough to know your purpose. You need to understand how to frame your purpose in a way that it resonates with your audience. So in those cases is to really do a lot of research around who their customers are, what they care about, or even potential customers, right? What their behaviors are, what their values are, all of those kinds of things to kind of figure out where's that connection point that we can use in messaging and marketing.
Right. So, I mean, a lot of times when people who maybe they don't know as much about what someone who does positioning or messaging might know, I mean, they may think it's squishy, right? They may not, like, you're never called in probably when somebody's doing amazing, right? So it's very KPI based, and that KPI is sales may be declining, right? Like, it's very obvious that they need to change something, so you can kind of get in there and help them figure that out, right?
Right, exactly. Yep. And it's really, the brand is, again, a foundation. And so it provides a useful touchstone, because I think in a lot of companies, people have opinions, right? Executives have opinions, and they want to come in and say, I think this should be this way. I think the design should look this way. I think the logo should be this color, which is all well and good, but really that's their opinion.
Right.
But the brand and the marketing isn't for them, right? They're not the ones buying the products or the services. So having a clearly defined strategic brand allows people to make strategic decisions, so that when an executive comes up and says, I don't like it, it should be blue, you can say, well, I really value your opinion, but that doesn't align with what our brand is, right? That doesn't support our purpose.
So let's talk a little bit about, I'm sorry, I just want to transition really quick because I know we're limited on time. So now that you've got those challenges and you're helping, your brand figure that out, when they're ready to launch a content strategy, how do you help them? How do you help them along with a content strategy and picking the right topics to talk about, and what types of content that is most relevant to their consumers?
Yeah, I think a lot of people struggle with content strategy because they think the challenge is coming up with ideas. Like, what am I going to say today? And I try to take kind of the guesswork and the frustration out of it by saying, that's not really the challenge. The challenge is we need to understand your customers, the decision, the steps that they take in learning about you and your category, and the decision process they take, understand what their frame of mind is at every step, what their fears are, what their expectations are, and then develop messaging that ties into those things and so that it resonates. So it's really starting with the customer and then building the entire strategy out from that. So moving from kind of the customer's values, beliefs, challenges, needs, to what messages are you going to use to intersect with those things and get their attention, what messages will resonate with them, and then figuring out, okay, we know the messages, then what types of content should we use based on the customers, and then finally the channels. And it's a very different way of looking at content strategy, because I think most people think, oh, I've got to start with the channels. And I want to be on the new sexy channel, right? I need to launch a TikTok. Everybody's on TikTok. And what I the argument I make is that maybe you should be on TikTok, maybe you shouldn't. Let's see where your customers are and let them determine what channels to use.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So in terms of then executing on those content strategies, like so let's say you've come up with some kind of a campaign that's good enough, and the ship has been pushed off the dock, it's got a little bit of wind behind its sails. How do you help a brand stay on track with that content strategy?
Gotcha. So my focus is really on strategy, whether on the branding side or the marketing side. And so what I am able to do is kind of support them in different ways once it comes to executing on the strategy. Many companies and organizations have their own in-house staff. And I think it's important for them to kind of own this work, especially if you're dealing with email or social media, where you're interacting directly with your customers or clients. Then it's really essential that what I tell clients is for you to manage that. You should not outsource those relationships. Would be like outsourcing dating. It just doesn't make sense. And so what I can do is really help train them, kind of function as kind of like training wheels to get them going until they build up the confidence, and kind of check back in with them on a regular basis, whether it's quarterly or annually, whatever it might be, just to make sure that kind of the plan's working and that they're seeing the results that they were expecting.
That's great. So last question. So obviously our industry is always evolving, right? It's evolving. It seems like every 3 or 4 months it feels like a year. Are there any strategies or tactics or techniques that you're seeing that are working really well, like looking into the future a little bit? Like, what should we keep our eyes on?
Yeah, so I really, instead of focusing on new technology, which I kind of think of as the shiny object,
Sure.
Everyone is distracted by that. I try to look more at consumer behavior and how that's changing. And so what I've been really interested in, there's been a lot of talk about kind of the purpose-driven brand and personalizing branding and this kind of humanization of brands. And I think it's really tied into a lot of larger shifts in the way that consumers now control the relationship with brands. Consumers are really generating more content than brands are. That desire to have access to brands, to the importance of transparency, whether it's around kind of data. It even ties into like food, wellness, beauty, industry trends in general. This idea of kind of really wanting an authentic experience with a brand people don't want to be marketed to.
Right.
So these are all kind of shifts that I'm really interested in. And on the one hand, there's this explosion of content, and there are consumers that are really excited to consume the content and generate more and more on their own. And then on the other hand, there's this intense burnout where people are just trying to kind of unplug and kind of running the opposite way. So these are all sort of trends that I'm watching and seeing how they play out from a branding and marketing perspective.
Well, Leigh, we really appreciate you coming on. We'd love to have you back to talk more when we have more time. This has been an amazing discussion. Where might people follow you or keep track of your thought leadership?
Sure. So you can go to my website, which is find-freedom.co. I also post things onto my LinkedIn page, and my Twitter handle is @Leigh George.
All right. Well, great. Well, don't forget also to follow the Law of Relevancy podcast. It'll be posted on all of the Bake More Pies social media channels, and we will be notifying you when we come out with a new episode. Again, I am Owen. I'm the president of Bake More Pies. We're a full-service digital marketing and advertising agency based here in Tampa, Florida. And thanks again for joining us.
Thanks.